The Thanksgiving table was set for 12, but the real confrontation was happening in my grandmother's study. The room smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish, the kind of place where important decisions were never questioned, only announced. My older sister Natalie Crawford stood at the head of the antique oak desk, holding a folder like it was already hers. According to family tradition, Natalie said, her voice smooth and assured, and according to Grandma's will, everything passes to the firstborn daughter. She paused, letting the words sink in. The house. The investment accounts. The estate. All of it. Her eyes flicked toward me. Lena gets nothing. My mother Helen sat near the window, nodding as she dabbed her eyes with a tissue. That's what your grandmother would have wanted, she murmured. Natalie has always been the responsible one. I stayed quiet, hands folded neatly in my lap. I'd driven 6 hours from Washington, D.C., for this Thanksgiving, fully aware of what was coming. I wasn't surprised. I'd been preparing for this moment for 5 years. My Aunt Marjorie shifted in her chair. Shouldn't we wait for the estate attorney before deciding anything? Natalie scoffed. I am an attorney. Corporate law. Boston. She straightened her shoulders. I know how to read a will. As the eldest daughter, I inherit the primary estate. There's a small provision for Lena, maybe $50,000, but the rest, roughly $3.2 million, is mine. She turned toward me with a practiced mix of pity and superiority. Well, aren't you going to argue? Say it's unfair. Cry a little. Instead, I smiled. Actually, I said, reaching into my bag, I brought something I'd like to share first. I slid a navy blue folder across the desk. It landed directly in front of her with a soft thud. Natalie frowned. What's this? Open it, I said calmly. Before she could respond, the study door opened. A tall man in his early 60s stepped inside, carrying a leather briefcase. His silver hair was neatly combed, his charcoal suit perfectly pressed. I apologize for being late, he said. Holiday traffic was worse than expected. He looked around the room. My name is Charles Bennett. I'm the estate attorney who prepared Margaret Crawford's trust documents. Natalie's confident expression faltered. I already have the will, she said quickly. Charles set his briefcase down. That will, he replied evenly, was superseded by irrevocable trust transfers executed in February 2019. The room went silent. Natalie slowly reached for the folder. Natalie's fingers hesitated before touching the folder. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the old wall clock behind her. Finally, she opened it. Her confident posture stiffened. These documents are dated, she said slowly, flipping through the pages. February 2019. Yes, I replied evenly. 2 weeks before Grandma's stroke. Her face drained of color. That's impossible, Natalie whispered. She couldn't have, my mother, Helen, stood abruptly. What are you talking about, Lena? What are those papers? Before I could answer, Charles Bennett opened his briefcase and laid several neatly organized documents across the desk. In February 2019, he said calmly, Margaret Crawford executed a series of irrevocable trust transfers. These documents moved virtually all of her assets out of her personal estate. Natalie looked up sharply. Transferred to where? Charles met her gaze. Into trusts. With Lena Crawford named as the sole beneficiary. The words landed like a physical blow. That's a lie, Natalie said hoarsely. She never told me anything like that. It's public record, I said quietly. Filed with the county. Registered with the IRS. Completely legal. Natalie's hands began to shake as she flipped through the pages. The house, the investment accounts, the Vermont rental property, all transferred, Charles confirmed. Effective immediately at the time of execution. My Aunt Marjorie covered her mouth. You're saying, there's no estate. There is no estate to inherit, Charles clarified. Because it no longer belonged to Mrs. Crawford at the time of her death. Natalie's voice dropped to a whisper. So the will is irrelevant, Charles said gently. It was superseded 5 years ago. She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing a stranger. You knew, she said. All this time, you knew. Yes, I answered. Grandma asked me not to tell anyone. Helen shook her head in disbelief. Why would she do this? Why would my own mother have me tell her? Charles hesitated, then looked at me. I nodded. Because Grandma trusted me, I said. Not to spend. Not to show off. But to protect what she spent 40 years building. Natalie slammed the folder shut. You manipulated her. You convinced an old woman behind our backs. No, Charles interrupted firmly. Mrs. Crawford was evaluated by 2 independent physicians before signing these documents. Both certified full mental competency. This was entirely her decision. Natalie sank into the chair, her breathing uneven. And for the first time that night, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't losing an inheritance. She had never had one to begin with. Natalie's voice broke the silence. Why, she demanded. Why would she choose you? The question wasn't curiosity. It was accusation. My mother, Helen, wiped her eyes. Your grandmother loved you both, she said weakly. This doesn't make sense. Charles Bennett folded his hands. Mrs. Crawford was very clear about her reasoning. Natalie shook her head violently. No. She was manipulated. Lena was always around her. Always visiting. That's undue influence. I stood up slowly. I visited Grandma because I love her, I said. Not because I wanted her money. Natalie scoffed. You expect us to believe that? Charles cut in. Let me explain the context. He turned toward the window, as if organizing decades of history. Your grandmother was widowed young. In 1972, she invested a $50,000 life insurance payout into real estate. Over 40 years, she built an estate worth over $3 million. He laid out the numbers carefully. The family home. A commercial rental property. A conservative investment portfolio. Natalie crossed her arms. So what changed? I took a breath. You did. Her eyes flashed. Growing up, I continued, Natalie was perfect. 5 years older. Confident. Popular. Valedictorian. Law school at Harvard. High-paying corporate job. I swallowed. I was the quiet one. I studied environmental science. I took a government job. Grandma never saw that as weakness. Helen looked uncomfortable. We just wanted the best for you both. Grandma saw the difference, I said. Not in success, but in values. Charles nodded. Mrs. Crawford often said Natalie saw money as proof of success. Lena saw it as security. Natalie laughed bitterly. That's ridiculous. Is it? Charles asked calmly. By 2018, Natalie had borrowed over $140,000 from her grandmother. None of it repaid. The room froze. Natalie's mouth opened. Closed. Those weren't loans. They were documented as such, Charles replied. With repayment promises. I looked at Natalie. Grandma told me everything. She was frustrated. You made more money than she ever did, but you spent it faster than it came in. That's none of your business, Natalie snapped. It became my business in February 2019, I said quietly. I remembered that conversation like it was yesterday. Grandma's kitchen. Snow outside. Her voice steady. I'm transferring everything to you, she had said. Because you'll protect it. I looked back at Natalie. She knew exactly what she was doing. Natalie's face twisted with rage and hurt. You stole my future. No, I said. I was entrusted with Grandma's past. And that was the difference. Natalie didn't speak for a long moment. Then she smiled. It wasn't relief. It wasn't acceptance. It was the kind of smile that came right before something ugly. So this is it, she said softly. You think you've won. I didn't say that, I replied. You don't have to. She grabbed her coat. Enjoy it while it lasts. The door slammed behind her. The silence she left behind felt heavier than her anger. My mother sank into a chair. Lena, this is going to tear the family apart. I sat down slowly. It already did. Years ago. Charles cleared his throat. You should be prepared. This won't end here. I nodded. I already knew. 2 weeks later, the first letter arrived. Notice of intent to contest the will. Natalie's signature was at the bottom. Her lawyer argued undue influence, emotional manipulation, lack of capacity. Every accusation painted me as a quiet parasite who had waited patiently for an old woman to weaken. It hurt more than I expected. I had loved my grandmother. Truly. And now her memory was being dragged into court like evidence of a crime. Charles met me in his office. This is aggressive, he said, scanning the paperwork. But not unusual. What are my chances? I asked. Legally. He looked up. Very strong. Emotionally. It's going to be brutal. He wasn't wrong. Natalie called my mother daily. She cried. She raged. She told anyone who would listen that I had stolen what was rightfully hers. Cousins stopped answering my messages. At the grocery store, I felt eyes on me. Whispers. Judgments. Then came the second move. A tenant from one of the rental properties contacted me, confused. We were told the building is being sold, he said. My stomach dropped. By who? Your sister, he replied. She said she was co-owner. I drove straight to Charles's office. That's fraud, he said immediately. She has no authority. But she's acting like she does, I said. And people believe her. Charles leaned back. She's trying to create chaos. Force you into a settlement. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying childhood memories, Natalie borrowing clothes without asking, making decisions for me, speaking over me. Always assuming control. This was just a bigger version of the same thing. Except this time, the stakes were millions. The next morning, I made a decision. I called Charles. I'm done being quiet. There was a pause. Then he smiled through the phone. Good, he said. Because now we go on record. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing to fight back. The press didn't knock. They pounced. Within 48 hours of filing our response in court, my phone started buzzing non-stop. Unknown numbers. Voicemails. Emails marked urgent. Is it true your sister is contesting the will? Did your grandmother disinherit her own daughter? Are you willing to settle? I ignored them all. Charles had been clear. Silence is no longer weakness. But unplanned noise is. Instead, we released a single, carefully worded statement through his firm. The estate of Margaret Crawford was transferred in full accordance with her documented wishes. All claims of undue influence are without merit and will be addressed through proper legal channels. Nothing more. Natalie, on the other hand, went loud. She gave interviews, posted emotional videos, shared childhood photos with captions about betrayal and stolen legacies. She cried on camera. People believed her. For a while. Then Charles played his hand. In court, he presented a timeline. Visits. Financial requests. Loan documents. Text messages. Natalie's lawyer objected constantly. The judge overruled just as often. Then came the real blow. Exhibit 47, Charles said calmly. A recorded conversation from February 2019, with consent, between Margaret Crawford and the defendant. The courtroom leaned in. My grandmother's voice filled the room, steady, lucid, unmistakably in control. I am not confused, she said on the recording. I am disappointed. I gave Natalie opportunities. She took and took. Lena gave time. Natalie went pale. The judge removed his glasses. This recording establishes clear intent. Natalie stood up. This is out of context. Charles didn't even look at her. There are 6 more. The case didn't end that day. But something else did. Natalie's narrative. Outside the courthouse, reporters changed their questions. Why did your grandmother feel financially unsafe around you? Did you repay the loans? Why did you claim co-ownership without documentation? Natalie stopped smiling. She stopped posting. She stopped calling. That night, my mother came to my apartment. She looked older. Smaller. I didn't know, she said quietly. About the loans. About the pressure. I know, I replied. She hesitated. I should have protected you more. I reached for her hand. We both loved her. That's what matters. But deep down, I knew something else. This wasn't about love anymore. Natalie wasn't losing gracefully. She was cornered. And cornered people don't retreat. They strike. 3 days after the hearing, my bank froze one of the estate accounts. No warning. No explanation. I found out when a payment to a contractor bounced. I called Charles immediately. This wasn't the court, he said after a pause. This was reported. Reported how? As suspected fraud. My stomach twisted. Natalie. He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. She's alleging you accessed accounts before probate finalized, he continued. Which is false, but enough to trigger a temporary freeze. For the first time, I felt fear creep in. Not panic. Not anger. Fear. The kind that makes you realize how fragile control really is. That same evening, an envelope appeared under my door. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. Settle or this gets ugly. I didn't call the police. I didn't respond. I scanned it, locked it, and handed it to Charles the next morning. He looked at it, then at me. She's escalating. What happens now? I asked. We stopped playing defense. Within hours, Charles filed an emergency motion. False reporting. Harassment. Interference with estate operations. But the real move came next. He subpoenaed Natalie's financial records. All of them. Credit cards. Business accounts. Personal loans. Natalie's lawyer tried to block it. The judge denied the request. 2 weeks later, the numbers came in. They were worse than anyone expected. Maxed out credit lines. Missed payments. Undisclosed debt totaling over $600,000. And then, there it was. A transfer. $75,000. From one of Grandma's accounts. Dated 2 months before her death. Natalie had already been taking money. Illegally. Charles stared at the screen. This changes everything. Natalie was arrested 3 days later. Not dramatically. No handcuffs in public. Just a quiet visit from investigators and a voluntary surrender. Fraud. Financial abuse of an elderly person. False reporting. The charges stacked fast. My phone rang that night. Natalie's number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Lena, she whispered. No anger now. No arrogance. Just fear. Please. I closed my eyes. This was never about the money, she said. I just didn't want to lose. You didn't lose, I replied. You gave it away. There was silence. Then a soft click. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time. The victory didn't feel loud. It felt final. And I knew there was only one part left. Thanksgiving arrived, 2025, and the house was quiet. Not a single argument. Not a single accusation. Just the smell of roasted turkey, the soft clatter of dishes, and the calm that comes after storms have passed. I stood at the edge of the table, looking at the family gathered. My mother, subdued but present. Aunt Clara, smiling politely, still unsure if she could fully forgive. And Natalie, absent. For the first time in decades, she didn't appear. The court had prohibited any contact as part of her probation. I carried a small folder, Grandma's old letters, photographs, and notes. A tribute, more than evidence. I set it gently on the table. My grandmother left a legacy, I began softly. Not just financial, but one of values. Of patience, responsibility, and respect for what others build. Mom's eyes glistened. Aunt Clara nodded. I paused, letting the words settle. You all know the story. Natalie challenged the estate. She contested it. She spent years trying to rewrite the past. I looked around, making eye contact. But the truth matters. Grandma Crawford chose who she trusted. She trusted me to protect what she built. And I did. No one spoke. I took a breath and continued. The estate is secure. The investments are growing. The house remains available for family use. The rental property generates steady income. And a portion of the estate now funds the Crawford Environmental Trust, $500,000 dedicated to protecting wilderness across New England. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "She would be proud of you," she whispered. I nodded, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. Pride mixed with relief. Responsibility mixed with freedom. This was not just money. It was trust, respect, and the fulfillment of a promise. Later that afternoon, I walked the Vermont property. The leaves had turned golden, the lake mirrored the late afternoon sun. I imagined Grandma sitting on the porch, watching, approving, silently proud. Everything she built, her work, her foresight, was still alive. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick message to Sarah. "It's done. Legacy intact. Peace at last." Her reply was immediate. "You did it. You honored her. You did what she trusted you to do." And I realized, finally, that victory wasn't about defeating Natalie. It was about preserving what mattered. About choosing stewardship over indulgence. About protecting a lifetime of hard work. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, I smiled. The estate was secure. The family, for the most part, healed. And the lessons Grandma tried to teach us, about patience, prudence, and responsibility, were finally being honored. Grandma Crawford had made her choice. I honored it. And in doing so, I honored her. The end.